Our story begins and we meet our hero named Tojima, and we see him training in the forest. We also see him punching a tree with his hand multiple times, and he shouts the word rider punch every now and then, and he actually breaks the tree when he hits it. We learn that since he was young, Tojima always loved Kamen Rider. Kamen Rider is a hero from a TV show, and Tojima saw him as the greatest hero in the world. Tojima used to watch every episode more than once, to the point where his mother started to worry about him, saying it was unnatural. But he wasn't interested in anything else. He would always sit in front of the screen whenever the hero appeared. He would always cheer for him while watching TV, saying, "Don't let the evil Shocker organization defeat you." We learned that Shocker was a large criminal organization and the enemies of Kamen Rider in the series. Even when his mother was saying goodbye to him, he wouldn't take his eyes off the screen for a second. He was so mesmerized and imitated the hero's moves, like when he said the words for a kick or a punt. The thing he loved most about Kamen Rider was that he always fought evil alone and upheld justice with a heart full of fairness. Out of so much admiration, he promised himself that one day he would definitely become just like him. The years passed and Tojima is now in high school. One day a girl suddenly grabbed his hand. He didn't understand what was happening. After gathering her courage, she told him that she liked him and wanted to go out with him. Tojima was shocked and quickly said, "Of course I agree." But suddenly the girl apologized and it turned out it was a prank. Tojima was of course very shocked and the whole school laughed at him. The bully Kajo said the idea was his and that his girlfriend Emily was the one who pulled the prank because she had lost a challenge. Tojima walked away, embarrassed and hurt. Emily started to feel genuinely guilty afterwards. Alone, he remembered when he was little, standing and watching some kids playing rock, paper, scissors, where the winner would be Kamen Rider and the others would be the evil characters, the Shocker members. Tojima saw them as kids just fooling around and thought to himself, they will never become real heroes. You can't be Kamen Rider through a game. Instead of playing with them, he stood alone, struck the hero's pose and said, "Seriously? I am the real Kamen Rider." Back to the present, we see Emily finding Tojima and apologizing for what happened. She was very upset, so Tojima decided to forgive her. They talked for a bit, and Emily told him she felt there was something special about him. Most of the boys at school are delinquents and don't study, but Tojima isn't like that at all. But at the same time, she also thought he wasn't normal. She said to him, "You have no friends and people talk about seeing you shouting by the river, making strange movements with your hands." Tojima didn't know how to respond, but she wasn't waiting for an answer. She was sure that his strangeness was what attracted her to him. Suddenly, a tough guy came and asked her, "Did you leave Kaijo? Or is this your new boyfriend?" His name was Ryo. He told her she was wasting her time with a loser like Tojima and said she should go out with him instead. Emily told Tojima, "Let's go," but Ryota stopped her and prevented her from leaving. At that moment, Tojima stepped between them and said sharply, "Let her go." He grabbed Ryota's hand and twisted it so hard it hurt him. Ryota tried to hit him, but Tojima easily blocked the punch. Then he let him go and said very calmly, "Now it's my turn for revenge." He then landed a single punch to his face, sending him flying and knocking him to the ground. His friends tried to attack Tojima to defend him, but surprisingly Tojima blocked both of them at the same time and said to them in a loud voice, "Now is the time for revenge." He hit them with 2 kicks, knocking them to their knees from the... While the bullies were writhing in pain, Emily stood there shocked and unable to believe what she had seen. Tojima stood there very calmly and said simply, "I just gave them back what they did to me." After that, he left them and walked away. Ryota fell screaming, "I will get my revenge on you, Tojima." Days later, a group of bullies from another school kidnapped Emily. She was screaming and crying. Ryota called for Tojima to come meet them. He told him, "Come on, we're declaring war on you." All the students gathered, watching scared and not understanding what Tojima had done to cause this problem. What made things worse was that none of Kojo's gang were at school today, meaning there was no one to help. The teachers were also standing by, not knowing what to do. But none of this mattered to Tojima, who indeed appeared and stood before them ready. Ryota was burning with anger after being humiliated in front of everyone and said he would teach Tojima a lesson he would never forget. But Tojima had a different perspective and said to them, "What war? This is between a bunch of kids. You don't even have jobs or a place in society." He looked at them with complete mockery and said, "How can you talk about control and competition when you're still living, eating and drinking off your parents' money, and even bathing and sleeping in their houses?" He said to them in a loud voice, "Instead of boasting like this, go fight real evil." The people, of course, were shocked by his words and thought he was crazy, but Emily looked at him with clear admiration. Ryota couldn't stand to hear any more of this, so he yelled, "Get him!" And they all attacked him at once. But Tojima didn't run away at all. He ran towards them with all courage. Unfortunately, numbers overwhelmed courage, as there were too many of them. They kept beating him, and he took a proper beating until he was bleeding. Then we see Ryota looking at him, laughing and saying in a loud voice, "Now I will take Emily as my prize." Emily was crying and screaming, "Someone help me." But none of the students moved. Everyone stood watching in fear, and no one defended. Amidst Emily's screams, she called out to Tojima, crying and saying, "Come help me, please." Her voice struck his brain like an electric shock. Tojima slowly began to lift his head and stood up on his feet, even though his body was literally broken all over. Everyone was shocked, and no one could believe he was able to stand again. They thought he had lost consciousness, but he stood and said in a loud voice, "Enough." Everyone fell silent, and Ryota froze in place. Tojima took off his jacket and said to them in a confident voice, "I didn't want to use this strength against you, but you left me no other choice." Then he took off his shirt too. Ryota was looking at him in astonishment and said, "What are those marks on your stomach?" Tojima stood in a strange pose, stretched out his hand and said, "Rider?" Then he made another movement and said, "Henshin." He ran towards them, screaming the word "right fight." Everyone was stunned. The bullies stood there, not understanding what was happening until he said it in a loud voice, "The rider." But nothing happened, and all the bullies laughed at him, calling him crazy. Ryota mocked him, saying, "Are you sick in the head or?" But after a few seconds, their laughter turned to shock. Tojima hit Ryota with a single punch that sent him flying through the air. He fell far away. All the people were frozen in place. After that, Tojima faced the rest of the bullies and, in one moment, beat them all, one after the other. None of them could stand against him. Even the teachers who saw the scene were astonished and couldn't believe Tojima could do this. Even Kojo himself saw what happened but couldn't believe his eyes. Emily stood there stunned, not understanding how the boy who was just on the ground could defeat an entire gang alone. Tojima turned to her and said calmly, "I am KAMEN Rider." Emily was about to cry, but Tojima approached her and smiled for the first time, saying, "Don't be afraid, everything is fine now." But instead of Emily being reassured, her expression changed and terror appeared on her face. She looked back at him with intense fear and then ran away at full speed. Tojima stood there, shocked, feeling his heart break in two. At that moment, he understood that what he had done was wrong and that he shouldn't have transformed. He thought to himself, "The only one I should have said that to is Shocker, not people." We return to the present time after that and see Tojima training again in the forest, punching trees with all his anger. He keeps thinking and saying, "No matter how much I train, I won't be able to become KAMEN Rider." He was saying this phrase while punching the trees nervously. Anger filled him, and each punch was stronger than the last. Suddenly, he heard a sound coming from behind him, and when he looked, he saw a huge bear coming at him. But Tojima, on the contrary, wasn't scared. He was sad and wished he were one of the evil Shocker members rather than a solitary wild bear. The bear attacked him, so he was forced to defend himself. But what happened was a surprise. Tojima grabbed the bear and hit it very hard, throwing it to the ground. The bear looked at him in fear, as if it couldn't believe a human could hit it. But the bear attacked him again and clawed his chest with its claws. Tojima felt pain but didn't retreat. In that moment, it showed that his strength had become truly strange because he managed to stand before the bear and punched it hard in the eye. A very strong punch that made it scream and run away. Tojima was standing silently and said to himself, "Even if I defeated a bear, it doesn't mean I've become KAMEN Rider." A little later, we find him at a toy shop selling all his old KAMEN Rider belongings. The shop owner was amazed by the amount of rare items he had, but Tojima told him, "I still have 6 more boxes right now, and 10 at home." After a few days, he went back to his house, and his house was completely empty. There was nothing left. He had literally sold everything related to KAMEN Rider. He said to himself, "I don't want to die alone amidst all these memories with some stranger throwing them away after I'm gone." While he was scrolling through the news, he saw a headline saying that Shocker had appeared. He was shocked and began to tremble as he clicked on the video, feeling that the moment he had waited for his whole life had arrived. The news was saying that a grocery store had been robbed a few days ago and that the thieves were wearing masks similar to Shocker masks. They entered the store imitating their strange voices, just like in the series. Tojima got upset and said, "This isn't the real Shocker, these are just thugs playing around." At work, Tojima heard his colleagues talking about another attack by Shocker. They said these events were happening in several places. People started saying there was a new trend going on, but Tojima refused to believe it and said, "This still isn't the real Shocker, it's just a ridiculous imitation." Afterwards, the news showed reports talking about many similar incidents all over the country. One of those who were arrested said, "I committed this crime because I had the mask at home, and when I wore it and imitated the voice, I suddenly felt a strange power inside me and felt for the first time in my life that I could do something real." Tojima was watching and said, "The irony, this kid is so stupid." One night, Tojima went to the festival near his house. He saw a young child with his father, and the scene reminded him of himself in the past and his father, who always gave him money to have fun. He remembered when his father gave him $30 and said, "Take it, son, buy whatever you want." That was the best day of his life back. Now Tojima was eating the same food he loved at the festival in the past, and the memories came back to him anew. He felt nostalgia and comfort for a while at the same time. In another place at the festival, a strange man was giving some thugs shocker masks. His name was Naka. He told them that tonight's job was simple extortion. He told them, "I always loved Shocker more than Kamen Rider, and that's why I became a criminal." The thugs laughed and said, "What is this strange story?" But he continued, "According to Shocker's logic, I am the great monster, and you are just my fighters. In short, you have to listen to." And indeed, seconds later, the thugs began to loot a stall at the festival, breaking things in the place and terrifying everyone coincidentally. This stall was close to where Tojima was. It was exactly the same scene of the Joker that he had always dreamed of confronting. The poor stall owner was being beaten and screaming, and Tojima stood unable to move. He looked around and saw a stall selling Kamen Rider masks. He approached the man and asked, "How much for this mask?" He looked back at the thugs who were still beating the man. His heart started beating fast. He stood there hesitant for a bit, but then he said to himself, "I can't just watch. It's my turn now." Images and memories flashed through his mind quickly. He remembered when he was little watching, training, and doing the rider pose. Now it was real, right in front of Shocker. He put on the mask and suddenly felt heat in his body. His blood was boiling in his veins, and his heart was pounding strongly. He took a step forward and said in a steady voice, "That's enough, Shocker." The thugs looked at him and said, "What is this clown?" But Tojima raised his head and said, "I am Kamen Rider." His eyes teared up. He felt like he was a child again. But the thugs laughed at him and said, "What is this crazy idiot standing in front of us?" But the thug standing in the back was watching, pleased, and thought to himself, "This is what I was waiting for, a real fight between Kamen Rider and the real Shocker." Tojima didn't wait. He took his signature pose and said in a loud voice, "Rider punch," and punched the first one of them with a very strong punch, literally breaking his skull. The others froze, but Tojima didn't stop. He jumped into the air and said, "Rider kick," and came down on one of them with a single kick from his leg, knocking him down instantly. All the people stood there astonished, no one understanding what was happening, but everyone saw that he had saved the poor man. Tojima himself couldn't believe it. He looked around and thought to himself, "This feeling is unmatched." All eyes were on him suddenly. He was afraid people would recognize him, so he ran quickly through the crowd and in another place, a girl was sitting reading a news story that said Kamen Rider had defeated Shocker. Her expression changed and she got angry, saying, "What is this disgusting thing? I was the one who was supposed to do that." She was very upset and couldn't believe someone had beaten her to it. She said as she read the news, "How can someone wearing just the mask without the full suit call himself Kamen Rider?" She looked in the mirror and said angrily, "Who does he think he is exactly?" It seemed this girl wanted to be the real hero who defeats Shocker. The next morning, we meet Yuro, who is giving her class at school. She was sitting reading a poem to the students in a calm voice. One of the students, named Asano, was fascinated by her way of explaining and was listening to her attentively. The poem was about a man who loved another man's wife. Yuro asked the student named Asano to rephrase the last line of the poem in a more contemporary way, but the boy was distracted and not concentrating on a single word. He started saying anything to the point where he mixed everything up and said that the poem's antagonist confessed his love for his teacher. Of course, that wasn't the meaning at all. Yuro smiled then and corrected him, saying that the meaning was different. At that moment, the whole class laughed at him, and Asano's face turned red with embarrassment. He felt like he wanted the ground to swallow him after returning home. Asano couldn't control himself from thinking about her so much. He started imagining how much he loved Yuro and dreamed of being with her now. He also imagined how she spent her time outside of school. Surely she did elegant things, like classic people. In his imagination, he saw her sitting in front of art pieces contemplating them, or sitting in front of a piano playing it, or maybe sitting drinking tea quietly in her garden, wearing a chic dress, but the reality was completely different. Yuro was at the gym holding weights and training like a beast. She was screaming while lifting weights, sighing like a fighter, her face full of anger as she thought about the Kamen Rider who had suddenly appeared. She hated him with all her heart and couldn't comprehend how someone like him had the audacity to call himself Kamen Rider when he wasn't even wearing anything but the mask. Here we see a glimpse of her past. When she was a little girl, she was returning home crying after being bullied by some kid. Her father was surprised and asked her why she didn't defend herself. She told him, "They were boys. I couldn't do anything." The father thought for a moment and then said to himself that he knew the solution that would help his daughter. He brought her a tape of an episode from the Kamen Rider series, and this part was called Kamen Rider Stronger. She was surprised and said to him, "Why are you showing me an old series?" But he said to her calmly, "Just keep watching." And in this episode, a new female character appeared named Yuriko. She told Stronger that she would fight with him. He was surprised because she was a girl, but he was astonished when he saw her transforming before him, calling herself Tackle, the electromagnetic human. At that moment, Yuro's eyes lit up and she became very excited seeing the first heroine fighting alongside Kamen Rider against Shocker. From that moment on, Tackle became her ultimate role model. She trained every day to imitate her moves and tried to perform her famous attack, finishing it with her heroic pose. Her father was always standing next to her, correcting her movements step by step so she would be exactly like Tackle. He memorized every detail of the character, even the way of speaking and the pose she did with her hand. He told her that some heroes shorten their names to make them more impactful, and Tackle was one of them, so she called herself Tackle one night, alone. Yuro decided to try Tackle's attack by herself. But while doing it, she accidentally bumped into a shelf and knocked down some videotapes. Among these tapes was one titled Farewell. She hadn't seen it before, so she got excited and played it immediately, but as soon as she read the title and watched the episode, she was shocked because this episode was about Tackle's final battle. She saw Tackle getting badly wounded by an evil doctor, and then she used her ultimate power, and this attack ended with a huge explosion, ending her life. Of course, Yuro couldn't comprehend what she had seen. She sat down, stunned and crying until she fell to the ground. She was completely devastated and couldn't breathe from so much grief. When her father returned from work, he found her sleeping on the floor, her tears and her face pale as if she had been crying herself to death. When she woke up, she was still affected by what she had seen. She kept asking herself why Tackle died and why Stronger didn't save her. She didn't understand how her beloved heroine could die like that. Her father tried to reassure her and told her that the attack Tackle used was a special power unique to her. Tackle used that power to save Stronger and get revenge on the villain and finish him off, and there was no other way. He told her that even though she died, she managed to save Stronger that day. Her father's words comforted Yuro a bit, and she felt some peace in her heart. Then her father continued and told her, Tackle was the greatest heroine in history, and that's why I named you Yuro after her. She was a symbol of justice, and even when she was being defeated, she never gave up and kept fighting until the end. After that, her father immediately surprised her with something else and brought her the real Tackle costume, which he designed himself. She looked at him, not believing it, and he said to her, Tackle didn't die, she is standing in front of me right now. At that moment, the girl cried from happiness and said to him in a broken voice, Can I really become like Tackle? Her father was also crying and said to her, Of course you are the new Tackle. From that moment, Yuro stood proudly and struck Tackle's famous pose, saying enthusiastically, The electromagnetic human Tackle. Her father was very happy for her then. And now at 24 years old, she has become a teacher but is still continuing on this path and still dreams of becoming like the second Tackle. But at the same time, her hatred for the new Kamen Rider has grown to insane levels. She sees him as pathetic and a fake and said angrily in front of the blackboard, This guy calling himself Kamen Rider is just a pathetic imitator, and I am the only one who can continue the path of true justice. She started writing her words on the board, but the students were looking at each other, not understanding what she was saying at all. At night, we go to Naka, who is sitting with his gang, telling them that they will attack 5 supermarkets in one day. The guys went crazy and said to him, You want to get us into big trouble? The police will catch us. But he didn't want to hear any objections and said that this time he would go with them himself. The gang said, We can handle it alone, but he was determined to go with them personally. He finished his talk and said to them, All right, prepare yourselves. This time I want to feel that we are truly Shocker. In another place, Asano is finally gathering his courage to confess to Yuro that he loves her. He was very nervous but decided to tell her in the end. He said that sentence to her more than once, terrified of course. Yuro was completely shocked and sat silent, not knowing how to respond because she couldn't imagine her students saying something like that to her. At the same time, the gang leader Naka and his gang began their attack on a new supermarket, stealing and beating anyone who stood in their way. The guys with him were very tense, but he didn't care about anything. Even when he saw the police entering, he coldly punched one in the face. At that moment, Yuro saw everything. She saw Shocker breaking things and beating the police, and she couldn't believe what was happening in front of her. While everything around her was in chaos, Asano was still talking to her, confessing his love, not noticing that a state of war was happening in front of him. But Yuro was shocked, seeing the police being defeated by Shocker. She thought to herself, I can't let them escape. These are the rivals I've had all my life. She left the boy and started running after them with all her strength. In another part, Tojima was sitting reading the newspaper and saw the news about Kamen Rider who saved people, but he still didn't believe that he was actually the one who did it. Suddenly, while walking, he saw in front of him the same gang, the Shocker gang. He was shocked and said to them, I was looking for you. The guys didn't know who he was, so he immediately put on the mask and said in a strong voice, "Henshin," and struck the Kamen Rider's famous pose. The gang, upon seeing him, realized he was the man who had beaten them before, and at that moment they became very irritated. Tojima then said to them, "I am Kamen Rider." His eyes were teary from the emotion. He said to them, "I've been looking for you for so long." In the other scene, we see Asano still running after Yuro, shouting at her, "Wait, Miss Yuro." But of course she wasn't hearing anything except the sound of her heart burning with anger because she saw the person she hated more than anyone. The man who stole the hero title from her, the fake Kamen Rider. Yuro was very tense, seeing the person who stole her dream and the title of Kamen Rider from her, and also seeing the gang standing there waiting for the fight. Suddenly she went to change her clothes and put on the fighter's outfit, the tackle suit, the one that looks like her battery, the one she dreamed of becoming like when she was little. She lifted her bag and gave it to Asano, saying, "Keep it for me for a while." And immediately she ran towards Tojima, at the time when Tojima was ready for the fight, and said in a loud voice, "Come on, Shocker, show me what you'll do today." Yuro intervened immediately and landed a very strong punch on him, sending him flying, of course. Tojima didn't understand what had happened, and the whole gang was frozen, not understanding anything. Yuro stood confidently and struck Tackle's legendary pose and said in her loud voice, "I am the electromagnetic human Tackle." Tojima was astonished, his eyes wide open. Is this the real Tackle? He felt like he was seeing his childhood idol in front of him, but the gang laughed at her and said, "Girl, you look too old for the childish moves you're doing." One of the gang members approached her, wanting to pat her head and treat her like a little kid. But immediately Yuro grabbed him by the neck with one hand and lifted him into the air. The gang froze in place. Tojima looked at her and thought to himself, "Oh my god, she really is strong." In a second she screamed electromagnetic waves and threw him into the air until he crashed into the rest of the gang, all of them falling on top of each other like dominoes. The people in the street were shocked. No one understood what was happening, but everyone knew that the person in front of them was a real heroine. After she finished, she went back to get her bag. Asano ran to her and said, "Miss Yuro, you are an angel who descended from heaven." She quickly put her hand over his mouth and said in a voice, "Not a word. I don't want anyone to know who I am." So Asano promised her he wouldn't say anything about her identity. She immediately took the bag from him and left him. Asano kept looking at her with complete admiration. In the other part, Naka was on the ground, very angry, swearing at Tojima, saying, "The fight between you and me isn't over yet." Tojima replied to him, "By the way, I got hit by her just like you, and we should all unite against her because she hit all of us." But the gang leader wasn't listening to anything because the sound of police sirens started getting closer. He said as he was escaping, "I always loved Shocker more." And he and the gang ran away immediately. Tojima took the mask off his face and looked towards Yuro, who had already left. He thought to himself, "Who is she? It seems she loves Tackle more than I love Kamen Rider himself." The next morning, Yuro was extremely happy seeing the newspapers talking about the new heroine Tackle and not about Kamen Rider this time. In the other part, Naka was sitting with his gang the day after the defeat they suffered. One of them asked him, "What's that in your hand?" He smiled and said, "I found a mask of a monster in a shop and bought it." He put it on his face and said to them, "See, when I wear it, I feel like I'm transforming into a real monster." He told them, "My name now is Yada Yada Komen." The guys were shocked and looked at him in terror. One said to him, "Man, you look really ridiculous." But he was taking it seriously and said to him, "Now there are riders and Tackle in the streets, so there must also be monsters like us." He continued in a very enthusiastic voice, "Tonight we will continue our mission." The gang was startled and said, "You mean a new robbery?" He said to them with an evil smile, "Yes, we will rob another store." At the same time, there was a streamer broadcasting live from a supermarket, telling his viewers that he would buy 100,000 yen worth of sweets for the trend. While he was at the cashier, the Shocker gang entered again and started terrifying the customers. One of them said to the cashier girl, "Give me all the money in the drawer." The girl stood there screaming, unable to move. The streamer was hiding, and instead of helping, he started a new live stream and wrote a new title, Shocker Robbery Live, and said enthusiastically, "Oh great, this will get millions of views." One of the gang members saw him and said, "What are you doing here, Fatso?" The guy replied, "This is my dinner." He said to him, "Kid, you'll get even fatter from the start." The streamer replied, "I'm already fat." People were terrified, but the streamer was happy because his stream suddenly got 100,000 viewers, and he just thought he had finally become famous. At that time, Tojima saw the live stream and kept shouting, "How can Shocker return? I have to go immediately." He used all his speed and noticed a strange girl running next to him. The two looked at each other and said, "Have we seen each other before?" Let's return to the supermarket and see a man standing in front of the gang saying to them, "Enough of what you're doing." The streamer was filming and thought he was a hero coming to save them. The gang leader got irritated and said, "Who are you?" The man calmly replied, I'm just an ordinary person and I'm telling you to stop what you're doing. But suddenly the man made a strange movement. He raised his hand and struck the shocker pose. In the blink of an eye he transformed. Everyone was shocked. The gang froze in place and the streamer became unable to speak from shock. Tojima and Yuro, who were on their way, saw the live stream and said in one voice, "What is this? The man transformed." He looked at the gang and said, "Enough of this cheap imitation, you are not real shocker." He said to them, "Listen well to the sound of real evil within me. Let's see who the new superhero that appeared is." Honestly, the events are making me really enjoy the anime, and I'm excited to know what will happen next. So if you're as excited as I am, Hero, don't forget to support us with a like and subscription so you can follow the rest of the events with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next video.